Hello there, thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. The War of the Worlds by hgwells. Chapter 13. How I Fell In with the Curate. After getting this sudden lesson in the power of the terrestrial weapons, the Martians retreated to their original position upon Horsewell Common, and in their haste and encumbered with the debris of their smashed companion, they no doubt overlooked many such a stray and negligible victim as myself. Had they left their comrade and pushed on forward, there was nothing at the time between them and London but batteries of 12-pound guns, and they would certainly have reached the capital in advance of the tidings of their approach. As sudden, dreadful, and destructive their advance would have been as the earthquake that destroyed Lisbon a century ago. But they were in no hurry. Cylinder followed cylinder on its interplanetary fight. Every 24 hours brought them reinforcement, and meanwhile the military and naval authorities, now fully alive of the tremendous power of their antagonists, worked with furious energy. Every minute a fresh gun came into position, until before twilight every corpse, every row of suburban villas on the hilly slope about Kingston and Richmond masked an unexpected black muzzle, and through the charred and desolated area, perhaps 20 square miles altogether, that encircled the Martian encampment on Horsewell Common, through charred and ruined villages among the green trees, through the blackened and smoking arcades that had been but a day ago pine spanies, crawled the devout scouts with the heliographs that were presently to warn the gunners of the Martians' approach. But Martians, now understanding our command of artillery and the danger of human proximity, and not a man ventured within a mile of either cylinder, save at price of his life. It would seem that these giants spent the early parts of the afternoon in going to and from, transferring everything from the second and third cylinders, the second in Addlestone Golf Ring and the third at Pyford, to their original pit on Horsewell Common. Over that, above the blackened heather and ruined buildings that stretched far and wide, stood one as a sentinel, while the rest abandoned their vast fighting machines and descended into the pit. They were hard at work there far in the night, and the towering pillars of dense green smoke that rose therefrom could be seen from the hills about Merrow, and even, it is said, from Penstead and Epsom Downs. And while the Martians behind me were thus preparing for their next sally, and in front of me humanity gathered for the battle, I made my way with infinite pains and labor from the fire and smoke of burning Weybridge towards London. I saw an abandoned boat, very small and remote, drifting downstream, and throwing off the most of my sodden clothes, I went after it, gained it, and so escaped out of the destruction. There were no oars in the boat, but I contrived to paddle as well as my parboiled hands would allow, down the river towards Helford and Walton, going very tediously and continually looking behind me, as you may well understand. I followed the river because I considered that the water gave me my best chance of escape should these giants return. The hot water from the Martians' overthrow drifted downstream with me, so that for the best part of a mile I could see little of either bank. Once, however, I made out a string of black figures hurrying across the meadows from the direction of Weybridge. Hardingford, it seemed, was deserted, and several of the houses facing the river were on fire. It was strange to see the place quite tranquil, quite desolate under hot blue sky, with the smoke and little threads of flame going straight up in the heat of the afternoon. never before had I seen houses burning without the accompaniment of an obstructive crowd. A little further, on the dry reeds up the bank, were smoking and glowing, and a line of fire inland was marching steadily across a late field of hay. For a long time I drifted, so painfully and weary was I after the violence I had been through, and so intense the heat upon the water. Then my fears got better of me again, and I resumed my paddling. The sun scorched my bare back. At last, as the bridge of autumn was coming into sight around the bend, my fever and faintness overcame my fears, and I landed on the Middlesex bank and lay down deadly sick amid the long grass. I suppose the time was then about 4 or 5 o'clock. I got up presently, walked perhaps half a mile without meeting a soul, and then lay down again in the shadow of a hedge. I seem to remember talking, wondering to myself during that last spurt. I was also very thirsty and bitterly regretful I had drunk no more water. It is curious thing that I felt angry with my wife. I cannot account for it, but my impotent desire to reach Leatherhead worried me excessively. I do not clearly remember the arrival of the curate, so that probably I dozed. I became aware of him as a seated figure in a soot-smudged shirt and with his upturned, clean-shaved face staring at a faint flickering that danced over the sky. The sky was what I called a mackerel sky, rows and rows of faint down plumes of clouds, just tinged with the midsummer sunset. I sat up, and at the rustle of my motion, he looked at me quickly. "Do you have any water?" I asked abruptly. He shook his head. "You have been asking for water for the last hour," he said. For a moment we were silent, taking stock of each other. I dare say he found me a strange enough figure, naked, save for my water-soaked trousers and socks, scalded, and my face and shoulders were blackened by the smoke. His face was a fair weakness, his chin retreated, and his hair lay in crisps, almost flaxen curls on his lower forehead. His eyes were rather large, pale blue, and blankly staring. He spoke abruptly, looking vacantly away from me. "What does it mean?" he said. "What these things mean?" I stared at him and made no answer. He extended a thin white hand and spoke in almost complaining tone. "Why are these things permitted? What sin have we done?" The morning service was over. I was walking through the roads to clear my brain for the afternoon, and then fire, earthquake, death, as if it were Sodom and Gomorrah. All our work undone, all the work. What are these Martians? "What are we?" I answered, clearing my throat. He gripped his knee and turned to look at me again. For a half-minute, perhaps, he stared silently. "I was walking through the road to clear my brain," he said, "and suddenly fire, earthquake, death." He relapsed in silence, with his chin now sunken almost to his knees. Presently he began waving his hand. "All the work, all the Sunday schools. What have we done? What has Weybridge done? Everything gone, everything destroyed. The church, we rebuilt it only 3 years ago, gone, swept out of existence. Why?" Another pause, and he broke out again, like one demented. "The smoke of her burning God up for ever and ever," he shouted. His eyes flamed, and he pointed a lean finger in the direction of Weybridge. By this time I was beginning to take his measure. The tremendous tragedy in which he had been involved, it was evident he was a fugitive from Weybridge, had driven him to the very verge of his reason. "Are we far away from Sunbury?" I asked in a matter-of-fact tone. "What are we to do?" he asked. "Are these creatures everywhere? Has the earth begun giving over to them?" Are we far from Sunbury? Only this morning I officiated early celebration. Things have changed, I said quietly. You must keep your head. There is still hope. Hope? Yes, plentiful hope for all this distraction. I began to explain my view of our position. He listened at first, but as I went on, the interest dawning in his eyes gave place to their former stare, and his regards wandered from me. This must be the beginning of the end, he said, interrupting me. The end, the great and terrible day of the Lord, when men shall call upon the mountains and the rocks to fall upon them and hide them from the face of him that sitting upon the throne. I began to understand the position. I ceased my labored reasoning, struggled to my feet, and then, standing over him, laid my hand on his shoulder. Be a man, I said. You are scared out of your wits. What good is religion if it collapses under calamity? Think of what earthquakes and floods, wars and volcanoes have done before to man. Did you think God had exempted Weybridge? He is not an insurance agent. For a time he sat in blank silence. But how can we escape? He asked suddenly. They are invulnerable. They are pitiless. Neither the one or perhaps the other, I answered. And the mightier they are, the more sane and worried should we be. One of them was killed to wander, not 3 hours ago. Killed? He said, staring about him. How can God's ministers be killed? I saw it happen, I proceeded to tell him. We have chance to come in for the thick of it, I said. And that is all. What is that flicker in the sky? He asked abruptly. I told him it was the heliograph signaling, that it was the signal of human help and effort in the sky. We are in the midst of it, I said, quite as it is. The flickers in the sky tell us of gathering storm. Wonder, I take it, are the Martians and Londonwards, where those hills rise about Richmond and Kingston, and the trees give cover. Earthworks are being thrown up and guns are being placed. Presently, the Martians will be coming this way again. And even as I spoke, he sprang to his feet and stopped me by a gesture. Listen, he said. From beyond the low hill across the water came the dull resonance of distant guns and a remote weird cry. Then everything was still. A cockchafer came drawing over the edge and past us. High in the west, the crescent moon hung faint and pale above the smoke of Weybridge and Shepperton, and the hot, still splendor of the sunset. We better follow this path, I said, northward. Chapter 14. In London. My young brother was in London when the Martians fell at Woking. He was a medical student working for an imminent examination, and he heard nothing of the arrival until Saturday morning. The morning papers on Saturday contained, in addition to legendary special articles on the planet Mars, on life in the planets, and so forth, a brief and vaguely worded telegram, and all more striking for its brevity. The Martians, alarmed by the approach of a crowd, had killed a number of people with a quick-firing gun, so the story ran. The telegram concluded with the words, formidable as they seem to be, the Martians have not moved from the pit in which they have fallen, and indeed seem incapable of doing so. Probably this is due to the relative strength of Earth's gravitational energy. On that last text, their letter writer expanded very comfortingly. Of course, all the students in the Kramer's biology class, to which my brother went that day, were intensely interested, but there were no signs of any unusual excitement in the streets. The afternoon papers tossed scraps of news under big headlines. They had nothing to tell, beyond the movements of troops about the common, the burning of the pine woods between Woking and Weybridge until 8. Then St. James Gazette, in an extra special edition, announced the bare fact of the interruption of telegraphic communication. This was thought to be due to the fading of burning pine trees across the line. Nothing more of the fighting was known that night, the night of my drive to Leatherhead and back. My brother felt no anxiety about us, as he knew from the description in the papers that the cylinder was a good 2 miles from my house. He made up his mind to run down that night to me, in order, as he says, to see the things before they were killed. He dispatched a telegram, which never reached me, about 4 o'clock, and spent the evening at the music hall. In London, also on Saturday night, there was a thunderstorm, and my brother reached Waterloo in a cab. On the platform from which the midnight train usually starts, he learned, after some waiting, that an accident prevented trains from reaching Woking that night. The nature of the accident he could not ascertain. Indeed, the railway authorities did not clearly know at that time. There was very little excitement in the station, as the officials, failing to realize that anything further than a breakdown between Byfleet and Woking Junction had occurred, were running the trains which usually passed through Woking, run by Virginia Water or Guildford. They were busy making the necessary arrangements to alter the routes of the Southampton and Portsmouth Sunday League's excursions. A nocturnal newspaper report, mistaking my brother for the traffic manager, to whom he bears a slight resemblance, waylaid and tried to interview him. Few people, except the railway officials, connected the breakdown with the Martians. I have read in another account of these events that on Sunday morning all London was electrified by the news from Woking. As a matter of fact, there was nothing to justify that very extravagant phrase. Plenty of Londoners did not hear of the Martians until the panic of Monday morning. These who did took some time to realize all that the hastily worded telegrams in the Sunday papers conveyed, but the majority of people in London do not read Sunday papers. The habit of personal security, moreover, is so deeply fixed in the Londoner's mind, and startling intelligence so much a matter of course in the papers, that they could read without any personal tremors. About 7 o'clock last night, the Martians came out of the cylinder, and moving about under the armor of a metallic shields, have completely wrecked Woking station with the adjacent houses and massacred an entire battalion of the Cardigan regiment. No details are known. Maxims have been absolutely useless against their armors. The field guns have been disabled by them. Flying hasters have been galloping into Chertsey. The Martians appear to be moving slowly towards Chertsey or Windsor. Great anxiety prevails in West Surrey, and earthworks are being thrown up to check the advance Londonwards. That was how the Sunday Sun put it, and a clever and remarkable from handbook article in the Referee compared the affair to a menagerie suddenly let loose in a village. No one in London knew positively of the nature of the armored Martian, and there was still a fixed idea that these monsters must be struggling, crawling, creeping painfully. Such expressions occurred in almost all the early reports. None of the telegrams could have been written by an eyewitness of their advance. The Sunday papers printed separate editions of further news came to hand, and some even in default of it. But there was practically nothing more to tell people until late in the afternoon, when the authorities gave the press agencies the news in their possessions. It was stated that the people of Walton and Weybridge and all the district were pouring along the roads Londonward, and that was all. My brother went to church at the Foundling Hospital in the morning, still in ignorance of what had happened on the previous night. There he heard allusions made to the invasion and special prayer for peace. Coming out, he bought a referee. He became alarmed at the news in this and went again to Waterloo Station to find out communication were restored. The omnibuses, carriages, cyclists, and innumerable people walking in their best clothes seemed scarcely affected by the strange intelligence that the news vendors were disseminating. People were interested, or if alarmed only on account of local residents. At the station he heard for the first time that Windsor and Chertsey line were now interrupted. The porters told him that several remarkable telegrams had been received in the morning from Byfleet and Chertsey station, but that these had abruptly ceased. My brother could get very little precise detail out of them. "There is a fighting going on about Weybridge," was the extent of their information. The train service was now very much disorganized. Quite a number of people who had been expecting friends from places on the southwestern network were standing about the station. One grey-haired old gentleman came and abused the Southwest Company bitterly to my brother. "It won't showing up," he said. 1 or 2 trains came in from Richmond, Putney and Kingston, containing people who had gone out for a day's boating and found the locks closed and a feeling of panic in the air. A man in a blue and white blazer addressed my brother, full of strange tidings. "There are hosts of people driving into Kingston in traps and carts and things with boxes of valuables and all that," he said. "They come from Mossy and Weybridge and Walton, and they say there is been gun heard at Chertsey, heavy firing, and that mounted soldiers have told them to get off at once because the Martians were coming. We heard guns firing at Hampton Court Station, but we thought it was thunder. What the dickens does it mean? The Martians can't get out of their pit, can they?" My brother could not tell him. Afterwards he found that the vague feeling of alarm had spread to the clients of the Underground Railway, and that the Sunday excursion began to return from all over the southwestern, Barnes, Wimbledon, Richmond Park, Kew, and so forth, at unnaturally early hours. But not a soul had anything more than vague hearsay to tell of. Everyone connected with the terminus seemed ill-tempered. About 5 o'clock, the gathering crowd in the station was immensely excited by the opening of the line of communication, which is almost invariably closed between southeastern and the southwestern stations, and the passage of carriage trucks bearing huge guns and carriages crammed with soldiers. These were the guns that were brought up from Woolwich and Chatham to cover Kingston. There was an exchange of pleasantries. "You will get eaten," "They're beast drummers," and so forth. A little while after that, a squad of police came into the station and began to clear the public off the platforms, and my brother went out into the street again. The church bells were ringing for evensong, and a squad of Salvation Army lassies came singing down Waterloo Road. On the bridge, a number of loafers were watching a curious brown scum that came drifting down the stream in patches. The sun was just setting, and the clock tower and the Houses of Parliament rose against one of the most peaceful skies it is possible to imagine. A sky of gold, bared with long transverse stripes of reddish-purple clouds. There was a talk of floating body. One of the men there, a reservist he said he was, told my brother he had seen the holograph flickering in the west. In Wellington Street, my brother met a couple of sturdy road rocks who had just been rushed out of Fleet Street with a still wet newspapers and staring placards. "Dreadful catastrophe," they bawled one another down Wellington Street. "Fighting at Weybridge, full description, repulse of the Martians, London in danger." He had to give 3 pence for a copy of that paper. Then it was, and then only, that he realized something of the full power and terror of these monsters. He learned that they were not merely a handful of small, sluggish creatures, but that they were swaying vast mechanical bodies, and that they could move swiftly and smite with such power that even the mightiest gun could not stand against them. They were described as vast spider-like machines, nearly 100 feet high, capable of speed of an express train and able to shoot out a beam of intense heat. Masked batteries, chiefly of field guns, had been planned in the country about Horswell Common, and especially between the Woking district and London. 5 of the machines had been seen moving towards Thames, and one, by a happy chance, had been destroyed. In the other cases, the shells had missed and the batteries had been at once annihilated by the heat ray. Heavy losses of soldiers were mentioned, but the tone of the dispatch was optimistic. The Martians had been repulsed. They were not invulnerable. They had retreated to their triangular cylinders again, in the circle about Woking. Signalers with heliographs were pushing forward upon them from all sides. The guns were in a rapid transit from Windsor, Portsmouth, Aldershot, Woolwich, even from north, among others, long wire guns of 90 tons from Woolwich. Altogether 116 were in position, or being hastily placed, chiefly covering London. Never before in England had there been such a vast or rapid concentration of military material. Any further cylinders that fell, it was hoped, could be destroyed at once by high explosives, which were being rapidly manufactured and distributed. No doubt, from the report, the situation was of the strangest and gravest description, but the public was exhorted to avoid any discouraged panic. No doubt the Martians were strange and terrible in the extreme, but at the outside there could not be more than 20 of them against our millions. The authorities had the reason to suppose, from the size of the cylinders, that at the outside there could not be more than 5 in each cylinder, 15 altogether, and one at least was disposed of, perhaps more. The public would be fairly warned of the approach of danger, and elaborated measures were being taken for the protection of the people in the threatened southwest suburbs. And so, with reiterated assurance of the safety of London and the ability of the authorities to cope with the difficulty, this quasi-proclamation closed. This was printed in enormous type on paper so fresh that it was still wet, and there had been no time to add a word of comment. It was curious, my brother said, to see how ruthless the usual content of the paper had been hacked and taken out to give to this place. All the Wellington Street people could be seen fluttering out the pink sheets and reading, and the stand was suddenly noisy with the voices of an army of hawkers following these pioneers. Men came scrambling off buses to secure copies. Certainly, this news excited people intensely, whatever their previous apathy. The shutters of a map shop in the stand were being taken down, my brother said, and a man in his Sunday raiment, lemon-yellow gloves even, was visibly inside the window, hastily fastening maps of Surrey to the glass. Going along the Strand to Talafar Square, the paper in his hand, my brother saw some of the fugitives from West Surrey. There was a man with his wife and 2 boys and some articles of furniture in a cart such as greengrocers use. He was driving from the direction of Westminster Bridge, and close behind him came a hay wagon with 5 or 6 respectable-looking people in it, and some boxes and bundles. The faces of these people were haggard, and their entire appearance contrasted conspicuously with the Sabbath-best appearance of the people on the omnibuses. People in fashionable clothing peeped them out of cabs. They stopped at the square, as if indecisive which way to take, and finally turned eastwards along the strand. Same way, behind these came a man in working clothes, riding one of these old-fashioned tricycles with a small front wheel. He was dirty and white in the face. My brother turned down towards Victoria and met a number of such people. He had a vague idea that he might see something of me. He noticed an unusual number of police regulating the traffic. Some of the refugees were exchanging news with the people on the omnibuses. One was professing to have seen the Martians. Boilers on stilts, I tell you, striding along like men. Most of them were excited and animated by their strange experience. Beyond Victoria, the public houses were doing a lively trade with these arrivals. At all the street corners, a group of people were reading papers, talking excitingly, or staring at these unusual Sunday visitors. They seemed to increase as the night grew on, until at last the roads, my brother says, were like Epsom High Street on a Derby day. My brother addressed several of these fugitives and got unsatisfactory answers from most. None of them could tell him any news of walking except one man, who assures him that walking had been entirely destroyed on the previous night. I come from Biffley, he said. A man on a bicycle came through the place in the early morning and ran from door to door, warning us to come away. Then came soldiers. We went out to look, and there were clouds of smoke to the south, nothing but smoke, and not a soul coming that way. Then we heard the guns at Chertsey, and folks coming from Weybridge. So I have locked up the house and come on. At that time there was a strong feeling in the street that the authorities were to blame for their incapacity to dispose of the invaders without all this inconvenience. About 8 o'clock, a noise of heavy firing was distinctly audible all over the south of London. My brother could not hear it for the traffic in the main thoroughfares, but by striking through the quiet back street to the river he was able to distinguish it quite plainly. He walked from Westminster to his apartment near Regent's Park about 2. He was now very anxious on my account and disturbed at the evident magnitude of the trouble. His mind was inclined to run, even as mine had run on Saturday on military details. He thought of all those silent, expected guns of the southern nomadic countryside. He tried to imagine boilers on stilts, 100 feet high. There were 1 or 2 cartloads of refugees passing along Oxford Street, and several in the Marylebone Road, but so slowly was the news spreading that Regent Street and Portland Place were full of their usual Sunday night promenaders, albeit talking in groups, and along the edge of Regent's Park there were as many silent couples walking out together under the scattering gas lamps as ever there had been. The night was warm and still, and a little oppressive. The sounds of guns continued intermittently, and after midnight there seemed to be sheet lightning in the south. He read and reread the paper, fearing the worst had happened to me. He was restless, and after supper prowled out again aimlessly. He returned, and tried in vain to divert his attention to his examination notes. He went to bed little after midnight, and was awakened from lurid dreams in the small hours of Monday by the sound of door knockers, feet running in the street, distinct drumming, and a clamour of bells. Red reflections danced on the ceiling. For a moment he lay astonished, wondering whether they had come or the world gone mad. Then he jumped out of bed and ran to the window. His room was an attic, and he thrust his head out. Up and down the street there was a dozen echoes to the noise of his window sash, and hats of every kind of night disarray appeared. Inquiries were being shouted. "They are coming!" bawled the policeman, hammering at the doors. "The Martians are coming!" and hurried to the next door. The sound of drumming and unpanting came from Albany Street's barracks, and every church within earshot was hard at work, killing sleep with vehement, disorderly tocsin. There was a noise of doors opening, and window after window in the houses opposite flashed from darkness into yellow illumination. Up the street came galloping a closed carriage, bursting abruptly into noise at the corner, rising to clattering climax under the window, and dying away slowly in the distance. Close on the rear of these came a couple of cabs, the forerunners of a long procession of flying vehicles, going for the most part to Chalk Farm Station, where the Northwest special trains were loading up instead of coming down the gradient into Austin. For a long time, my brother stared out of the window in blank astonishment, watching the policemen hammering at door after door and delivering their incomprehensible message. Then the door behind him opened, and the man who lodged across the landing came in, dressed only in shirts, trousers, and slippers, his braces loose about his waist, his hair disordered from his pillow. "What the devil is it?" he asked. "A fire? What the devil of a row?" They both craned their heads out of the window, straining to hear what the policemen were shouting. People were coming out of the side street and standing in groups at the corner talking. "What the devil is this about?" said my brother's fellow lodger. My brother answered him vaguely and began to dress, running with each garment to the window in order to miss nothing of the growing excitement. And presently, men selling unnaturally early newspapers came bowling into the street. "London in danger of suffocation. The Kingston and Richmond defences force fearful massacre in the Thames Valley." And all about him, in the rooms below, in the houses on each side and across the road and behind the park terrace, and in hundreds other streets of that part of Marylebone and the Westbourne Park District, and St. Pancras, and Westward, and Northward, and Kilburn, and Street Johnson Wood, and Hampstead, and Eastwood, in Shoreditch, and Highbury, and Haggerston, and Hoxton, and indeed through all the vastness of London, from Ealing to East Ham, people were rubbing their eyes, and opening windows to stare out, and ask aimless questions, dressing hastily as the first breath of the coming storm of fear blew through the streets. It was the dawn of the great panic. London, which had gone to bed on Sunday night oblivious and inert, was awakened in the small hours of Monday morning to a vivid sense of danger. Unable from his window to learn what was happening, my brother went down and out onto the street, just as the sky between the parapets of the houses grew pink with the early dawn. The flying people on foot and in vehicles grew numerous every moment. "Black smoke!" he heard people crying, and again, "Black smoke!" The contagion of such an enormous fear was inevitable. As my brother hastened on the doorstep, he saw another newsvendor approaching and got a paper forthwith. The man was running away with the rest and selling his paper for shilling each as he ran, a grotesque mingling of profit and panic. And from this paper my brother read the catastrophic dispatches. "The Martians are able to discharge enormous clouds of black and poisonous vapor by means of rockets. They have smothered our batteries, destroyed Richmond, Kingston, and Wimbledon, and are advancing slowly towards London, destroying everything from the way. It is impossible to stop them. There is no safety from the black smoke but an instant flight." That was all, but it was enough. The whole population of the great 6 million city was stirring, sleeping, running. Presently it would be pouring at mass northwards. "Black smoke!" the voices cried. "Fire!" The bells of the neighboring church made a jungle tumult. A cart, carelessly driven, smashed, aimed shrieks and curses against the water thrown up the street. Sickly yellow lights went to and from in the houses, and some of the passing cabs flaunted in extinguished lamps. And overhead the dawn was growing brighter, clear and steady and calm. He heard footsteps running to and from the rooms, and up and down stairs behind him. His landlady came to the door, loosely wrapped in a dressing gown and shawl. Her husband followed, ejaculating. As my brother began to realize the importance of all these things, he turned hastily to his own room, put all his available money, some £10 altogether, in his pockets, and went out again on the streets. This is the end of today's story. I hope that these past minutes helped you relax and ease you into falling asleep. If you are not 100% there yet, let us just do a breathing exercise. Count mentally with me your breath intakes and exhales. Concentrate on the count, nothing more. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3.